can have a look at how to look after your eucalyptus seedlings when you got them in pots. They're quite easy to kill, these things. These ones I've got here in a box. These are about 4 months old. It's just February here in New Zealand, end of summer, wow, mid-end of summer. These were planted in September from seed, so yeah, roughly 4 months old, and you can see the kind of growth you can get is quite impressive if you keep water and fertilizer up to them. Main things with these is you have to water them every day or they will be dead within days. You leave these 2 days without watering in this climate. A bad example today is actually overcast and drizzling, but on the east coast of New Zealand here it is extremely dry, and we get constant dry winds in summer, so if you don't water these they'll be dead in no time. They will literally wilt, and once they start wilting you've got very little time to pull them back. So these are mainly in what we call PB2s, so these are pint bag number 2, so 2 pints. I guess these are roughly around a litre worth of soil in each of these. I just use cheap and nasty potting mix from Bunnings, which is just, there's nothing special about it, and they claim on the label it has around 3 months of fertilizer in it, but to be honest, growing these it won't last that long. You'll get a month or 2 before you need to fertilise them, and it's very obvious once it's time to fertilise. I've got here one that probably is due for a top up fertiliser, and I'll put next to it one that's had fertiliser. So that's 2 nitens. One on the left has had fertiliser recently, one on the right starting to yellow up. You can see a bit more of the purple, often see this purpley in the leaves, and they'll slow down, they'll virtually stop growing. So it's pretty easy to tell when they're due for fertiliser, and if you don't fertilise them they will just not grow, they will just literally stop and they'll just look sicker and sicker and sicker. So depending on how big you want them, and I don't always fertilise the hell out of them, because even in these little bags you can get them huge if you keep fertiliser and water up to them, so I often think better growing at a more reasonable rate and not being too big. I like them about that size for the end of summer. And that tree's probably about 60 centimetres from the top of the soil. That's about what I reckon for that size pot is a good size. I wouldn't grow them too much bigger than that. I'll leave that now. Probably won't put any more fertiliser on it. That's globoidea, that's stringy bark. I've got over here a regnans. That's in a PB, that's a PB5, so that bag's just over twice as big. These you can grow a lot bigger. That there would be getting on for 80 centimetres probably. By the end of summer you can get that close to a metre, and it'll have quite a substantial trunk on it if you keep water and fertiliser up to that. That's a pretty healthy looking tree. So yeah, big bag like that or big pot, easily a metre by the end of summer, ready to plant out. And those big bags, they're a bit more time and effort, a bit more cost of potting mix, but you're still only talking cents. But when you plant those out they'll absolutely rocket away, whereas the little ones, these PB2s, take a little bit longer to get established. So yeah, I've got in my garden, I've just got a home garden, vegetable garden. I put these in. I've got them, another thing is you want to keep them out of the wind as much as possible, so I keep them in the vegetable garden. I'm in town, so they're pretty sheltered. Out in the wind they'll dry out really fast. So I have an automated sprinkler. I just sprinkle once a day for about half an hour, and they still dry out. And what I'll do is I'll go around and just pick them up, and if they feel light, as some of these do, I just have a bucket of water sitting around that's about, see that one's floating, so yeah, quite dry. I just pop them in a bucket of water. I'll chuck all the light ones in there, give them a soak for an hour or two or overnight, and that'll get the soil back to saturated. It's easier than running the sprinkler day and night. You see the roots starting to, get some light on here. Roots starting to come out of the bag there, so I'll probably, usually I'll just pull those off as they start to come through. I mean, they don't do any harm, but I wouldn't want them getting big. Just keep them down to something manageable. Okay, so watering, yep, got to water every day. Fertilizer, they'll stop growing without it. I personally use, this is something you can buy in bulk in New Zealand. They just call it, Ravensdown calls it lawn fertilizer. It's a mixture of granules of, the white is ammonium sulfate and the grey is superphosphate. So I think this is about, I think it's 14 nitrogen to 2 phosphorus. So no potassium, it's predominantly ammonium sulfate, which is nitrogen. So that there, I found that to be the best. That's extremely fast acting, so I'll just take a couple of, just a small handful like that and sprinkle it like that. And if I came back in 3 days, that colour will have changed completely to green like that, a darker green. And that there will literally start putting on growth within a few days. This stuff is, yeah, I recommend for nitrogen, ammonium sulfate, but don't go overboard with it. It is a bit harsh on, if your seedlings are little, I only just tend to use just a little bit, just a couple of granules, and put it well away from the trunk. But once they're this size, yeah, it'll perk them up straight away. So I'm not sure how much effect the phosphorus is having, but definitely they like, it's obviously the nitrogen that they need to keep them cranking along. And yeah, if I fertilise these, they would get really big, and frankly I don't think the pot's big enough to warrant that, so I'd rather have them more balanced to the size of the roots. So I like this size. I'd be that there to me is a good size for planting out. But I won't be planting these out this time of year in New Zealand. Maybe on the west coast, but not here on the east coast. They'll be dead. If I planted these out here, they'd be dead. Within days. You can see my lawn, if I wasn't watering it, wow, it's pretty dead anyway. Okay, so just a quick look at what I've got here. That there, as I said, globoidea, that's a stringy bark. I've got a globulus growing there. These are super fast growing when they're seedlings, and they'll get really big really quickly compared to other species, because, well, they start out from a much bigger seed in the first place, so when they come up they're actually quite big, even at the cotyledon stage. So that one there is probably getting a bit nutrient deficient, but I'll leave it. What else I've got there is, what is that? Oh, that's cinerea. So that foliage, that greyish rounded foliage, that tends to retain that into adulthood. So they're a good tree for around here. They seem to be quite drought proof. What else? I've got some leucoxylon here. You can see they've got leaves that hug the stems, and quite a distinctive seedling. The sort of triangular leaves, quite different from other species that have the stem clasping leaves like nitens. It's quite different. What else? Got over the back there, fastigata, which are always, that's that greeny one there with the lance shaped leaves, always extremely healthy looking seedlings, bright green leaves. That's another leucoxylon next to it. Here I've got a dalrympleana. These are pretty rare in New Zealand, don't see many of these, although they're hard to distinguish from other species, but quite an attractive seedling with the green rounded leaves. Got another nitens there. Funny thing with nitens, I've got my seeds, I've just collected them from different stands around the place, and seedlings are quite variable. Some have these lance shaped leaves, whereas others have these quite rounded leaves. And the adults, there's two quite distinct forms of adults. These ones with the rounded leaves tend to have not have many low branches and not much bark hanging in the tree, the ribbony bark, whereas the other ones with these triangular type leaves I've found they're often quite low branching and bushy and a whole lot of ribbons, so must be from two different populations in Australia, I'm assuming. And lastly I've got that regnans there, which is, like I say, is quite large, pretty healthy looking tree. They definitely will grow a lot better in a bigger pot. I just prefer the little ones, they're just more practical, but that will do a lot better when it's planted out, grow a lot faster. So there you go. Any questions in the comments, and sorry to the guy who commented that I mumble a lot, so I'm trying to do less mumbling.